He shoved himself into the carriage, and the door closed on my reaching hand. The emotion that drove me in that moment was abandonment, raw and immediate. I threw my weight against the glass and shouted his name. "Even stop!" I said, breath burning, while the train hissed and began to pull away. The platform lights slid past his shoulder as he turned his face deliberately away, and the conflict of that action, the sudden end with no explanation, became the whole problem I had to solve. I was already at the edge of the platform because I'd missed my connection and had been late to our meeting. I had his satchel in my other hand and the ticket wallet in my coat pocket. I had not expected him to leave without talking. I had expected to argue, to cry, to demand an answer. Instead, I met a carriage window, a closing gap, and a man moving away. The stakes were clear. Our relationship ended not with words, but with a deliberate exit. That absence felt like an accusation and a question at once. I bent to pick up whatever small thing remained where he had been standing. The platform was noisy, shoes, distant announcements, the metallic sigh of doors, and every sound beat against my chest. I found a creased commuter pass on the bench where we'd planned to meet. My thumb ran over the fold until I felt the thin paper give under skin and fingernail. I held the pass up against the lamplight and saw his initials scrawled on the corner. EC. The creased pass was a concrete object that linked me to him. I could smell his cedar clogged in my mind and the weight of his leather satchel in memory. A man sitting a few feet away rose and walked toward me without quick steps or hesitation. He had a satchel, too, an overcoat that hung cleanly at his shoulders, and a measured way of closing distance. He came and sat on the bench beside me and looked at the pass in my hand. "You shouldn't run after a closing carriage like that," he said. "You could fall," he spoke with a low evenness that stopped me from saying anything at first. His voice was not intruding, it felt like a question placed beside me. "Who are you?" I asked, breath raw. He didn't say his name right away. He watched the train's taillights recede. "My name is Luca," he answered. And then he tilted his head the way people do when they're reconfirming a detail against what they remember. "You know Even, don't you?" You called him by name. I felt doubt rise and then slam into something colder. The thought that Even had left of his own volition. Doubt became suspicion, then a new prick of anger. I tightened my fingers around the pass until the paper bent. Luca reached out and touched the bench, the contact small and not intrusive, and then he said something very specific. His train pass was creased in the same place this morning. He folded it that way before the ticket gate. He kept checking his watch at 11:45. His words landed as information, not speculation. That small detail shifted my certainty. I had assumed he had left in a rush or in panic. Luca's observation made it possible that his leaving had been planned. I forced my voice into something steadier. "He didn't tell me anything. We were supposed to meet." The sentence came out short. My hands wouldn't stop moving. I folded and refolded the pass. "Luca, you should open it. There's often something people tuck inside." The suggestion was gentle, not demanding. I slipped a thumbnail under the last fold and opened the pass slow enough to feel every small sound of paper separating. There was a folded scrap inside, no bigger than a receipt. The scrap had a time and an address written in his handwriting and a single line beneath. "Tell her I'm sorry." The paper hit me like a physical thing. I tasted copper and felt the room tilt only because my legs went weak. Abandonment surged into another form. Betrayal, not the sharp scream of cruelty, but the cold calculation of silence. I pressed the scrap flat and read the address again. The address was to a small office across the river and a time 3 hours after our scheduled meeting. My first impulse was to run back to the carriage tracks and try to flag the train down. My second impulse was to call him. My thumb hovered over his number and then withdrew. A new feeling moved through me, the beginning of resolve. I did not yet know what I would do with the scrap, only that I could not leave it folded where someone else might never know. Luca watched me with slow attention. "He kept to himself this morning," he said. He took the platform with his head down and he rubbed the crease on his pass, as if memorizing it. He looked like a man keeping a list of things to do. That picture fit with the scrap in my hands. My suspicion shifted into a searching need. I wanted to know whether his absence had been an act of protection, avoidance, or something else altogether. "Why tell me this?" I asked. Luca's eyes held mine longer than most people's did. "Because you look like someone who will go find the answer," he said. "And because I had a walk to catch and I recognized you when you ran." A brief laugh escaped me, half disbelief and half anger. "Ivan left a note and didn't tell me," I said. "Who does that?" "People who are protecting themselves sometimes," Luca answered. "People who are afraid of the consequences of an explanation sometimes choose the quieter path." He folded his hands over his satchel. The next decision came fast. I could stand there and let the train carry him away without a real reason, or I could do the practical thing. Go to the address on the scrap and demand an explanation. I slid the scrap into my ticket wallet and closed it. My hand shook, but my jaw set. We left the platform together. Luca walked alongside me at a slow pace, not interfering but present. I kept my coat wrapped tight and my scarf wound twice around my neck. The city smelled of wet concrete and hot coffee as we stepped into the street. The platform lights gave way to sodium lamps and passing taxis. At the ticket kiosk, I bought a map printout, and the clerk drew me a line to the address. I watched the clerk's pen move and thought of even folding his pass the exact same way. A new emotion arrived. Suspicion eased into curiosity. Curiosity edged toward determination. I told myself I would go to that office and wait if I had to. Luca walked with me to the bus stop. He did not offer explanations or theories about Ivan. He kept returning to small, checkable facts. The crease in the pass, the time he had noticed Ivan's watch, the way Ivan's shoulders tightened when a commuter brushed past. Those details became the scaffolding of my next moves. We rode the tram across the river. The carriage smelled of damp wool and warm breath. People shifted in pockets of commuters, and a woman near us hummed a hymn under her breath. I laid the scrap on my knee and watched the letters as buildings slid by the window. I rehearsed what I might say to Ivan. Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me? Were you planning this? Each question felt like a physical instrument I might use to pry the truth out of him. When we reached the street near the address, Luca pointed across to a narrow brick building with a brass sign. The sign said nothing dramatic, a small legal consultancy, 2 names and a phone number. I felt a twist of disbelief and then anger again. It was the wrong kind of place to hide a fare or a work transfer. It suggested appointments, schedules, the kind of thing that people did when they wanted distance without drama. I walked up the short set of steps and pressed the buzzer. A woman answered through the intercom and asked a question about an appointment time. I gave the name Ivan Carter and the woman buzzed me in. Her voice on the intercom was neutral. Inside, the hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and old paper. The receptionist looked up and asked me to take a seat. I sat with my hands folded over the folded scrap in my lap. Luca leaned against the wall, hands in his coat pockets. I tried to keep my breathing even. The receptionist picked up the phone to call someone, and the sound of her voice carrying down the corridor felt like the slow turning of a gear. A man emerged from an inner office. He looked older than the name on the door suggested, and he held a stack of papers. When he saw me, his eyes moved quickly to the scrap in my hands. "You must be Nora," he said. "Ivan called earlier and said you might come." He spoke without surprise. My hands grew colder. "He left me this note in case no one could reach you. He me to give it to you if you came. Where is he now?" I asked. He hesitated for a single beat and then said, "He left on the 11:30 train." The sentence made the world very small. It put the choice back onto me. I could walk out and try to follow, or I could demand a phone call. My hands tightened on the scrap. The emotion inside me shifted again, from determination to an urgency that felt almost like panic. "Did he say why?" I asked. The man shook his head. He only said he would be in touch. He folded his paper and set it down. He looked as if he had rehearsed what to do. The phrase landed like a file being closed. I pushed my chair back so fast it scraped. "Ivan," I said aloud, and my voice sounded small in the hall. "Ivan, you can't just—" The receptionist's eyes flicked to Luca and then away. "He's not here now," she said. "But this office has copies of the contract he signed this morning if you need to see them." Her offer implied things I did not want to assume. I asked to see the contract. The man brought out a slim folder and slid a printed document across the desk. There was Ivan's handwriting on the margin of one page where he'd jotted a single note. The note referenced a meeting with a client at noon and a line that read, "Make decision today. Tell Nora later." The words were small and functional. They didn't say why. I felt another shift from betrayal to a hard, methodical focus. If he had written those words, then his leaving was not impulsive. It was a choice framed by other obligations. I needed to know what those obligations were. I needed to know whether I had been excluded to protect someone else or whether he had chosen himself over me. I stood and said, where would he go next? The man tapped his chin and then pointed to an address on the city map where Ivan's last client meeting had been scheduled. If he finished there, he might have headed to the river crossing or the business park across the bridge, he said. Those are the places men go when they want to clear their heads. Luca looked at me then and spoke for the first time in a way that narrowed my options. You can walk out and look for him now, he said. Or you can call and sit here and wait. If you go, I'll come with you. He did not ask permission. He simply offered. That offer removed something heavy from me. I had been balancing between staying and chasing. Luca's presence turned indecision into a choice. I stepped back into the street and felt the chill of evening press against my face. The city had folded into dusk. We walked fast, cutting through alleys where the light leaned yellow and the air smelled of frying oil from a late shop. On the footbridge across the river, I stopped and leaned on the rail. The water below moved in visible bands, driven by the current, and the reflections of streetlights jittered on the surface. I ran my thumb along the edge of the folded scrap and read the handwriting once more. A bus hissed past and sprayed cold mist that landed on my hair. My fingers tightened around the paper until it crumpled. A thought struck me like a pinprick. There could be a third explanation that made both hurtful and practical sense. He might be avoiding me because of money, because of family, or because of something he thought I couldn't handle. That thought tightened my throat and turned my determination into a need to know the exact cause. I would not accept vague reasons. Luca spoke quietly. Tell me what you want to do next, Nora. He used my name with the ease of someone who believed names mattered. The directness steadied me. Find him, I said. Find him and make him explain the note. My answer was short and functional. I felt the final emotion shift that night. From empty abandonment to a practical pursuit edged with anger and the need for clear, spoken answers. We split the search. Luca took the river route toward the business park, while I headed to the transit terminal where trains stopped long-term. We agreed to meet at the late night cafe 2 blocks from the terminal if we found nothing. I kept the folded scrap inside my ticket wallet like a small, urgent proof. At the transit terminal, I asked the clerk if anyone had bought a one-way ticket toward the suburbs on the 11:50 train. The clerk tapped keys and then said, "There's a record of a one-way purchase this morning under Evan Carter for 11:30. He bought a single-seat, middle carriage. The detail matched the scrap and the contract note and tied the 3 threads into a pattern. Deliberate travel, an appointment, and an unanswered apology." A woman in a grey coat stood near the terminal exit and stared at me for a long second before approaching Nora. She asked. "Yes," I said. "I saw you on the platform when the train left. I work at the clinic on Finch Street." Evan came in this morning with a small cut on his hand. He's something about paperwork. He left his satchel and said he'd be back at noon. He didn't return for it. Her voice had a steady clarity that supplied a new fact. Another external fact shifted the search. The clinic's address was a block from the office we'd left. Evan had been there in the morning, then in the office at noon, then gone. Each place added a small concrete detail to the shape of his day. I left the terminal with a list: clinic, office, river, business park. I had 2 finite actions to take: trace his route and force a confrontation, or sit and allow messages to pass between us. I chose the former. I called his number once and let it ring until voicemail answered. The message left a record but no answer. At midnight I met Luca at the cafe. He had a notebook with scribbled times and small notes. 11:05 folded past 11:40, watch check, clinic 9:20, cut on hand. He set the notebook on the table and pushed it toward me. "I keep notes when I observe something I think matters," he said. "It's less about interfering and more about making sense out of what you can't see when you re-inside the situation." His methodical voice made the search feel not frantic but mapped. We planned. I would go to the clinic in the morning to ask whether Evan had left anything in more detail, and Luca would attempt to check the business park's security logs. The night ended with both of us leaving the cafe separately. I walked home with the ticket wallet in my hand and the scrap folded inside. The concrete things of the day, creased pass, timed note, clinic report, had moved my feelings from raw abandonment into a determined, procedural hunt for the truth. When I reached my building, I paused on the stairs and opened the wallet again. The scrap felt small and thin between my fingers. I could still taste the sharpness of being left. I thought of Ivan's hand running over his neck when he was uncomfortable, the crease by his eyebrow when he worried, the way he avoided eye contact. I thought of the man I had loved, the one who had chosen silence, a final decision settled. I would not accept silence as an answer. I would make him speak. I folded the scrap back into the pass and slipped both into the wallet. I clipped my scarf tighter and pushed open the door to the dim hallway. As I stepped inside, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and read one new message. I left because I couldn't keep hurting you. Meet me if you want answers, 12 noon, Bridge House. The message had no sender id. My breath hitched. The platform, the train, the folded pass, everything focused into that line on the screen. I turned it over in my mind and then out loud. He wants me to meet him. Bridge House. 12. I sat on the bottom stair and felt my pulse in the side of my neck. The last external event of the chapter arrived as Luca's footsteps in the corridor. He had come back to check on me before morning. He stopped at the landing and put a hand on the rail. Nora, he said, if you were going to do this, don't go alone. His voice was simply an offer, not a command. I closed my wallet, rose and said, I won't go alone. I left my apartment light on for an hour and then turned it off. I folded my scarf around my neck and set the folded pass into the wallet again. I walked out into the street with Luca beside me and the city moving in real things, a taxi horn, the scrape of shoes, the smell of toast from a bakery still open. At the corner, Luca placed a hand lightly on my elbow and said, let's go find him. The hand was not a comfort I needed explained. It was a physical confirmation of the choice I had already made. I stepped forward and the scrape of my shoe on pavement was the last concrete sound before the night held its breath with me. The chapter ends with that movement. Decision enacted, ticket folded, and a companion at my side as I head toward the place named in the scrap. The unresolved question remains, why did Ivan leave without speaking? And the immediate plan is set. The closing image is a single, literal step off the platform's edge and toward the street, where I will follow the trail of small facts until he is forced to explain. That step is what I do next. The carriage doors breathed shut, and I saw Ivan 5 seats ahead, his profile turned away as if leaving could be practiced like a habit. Abandonment tightened my fingers around the leather of my ticket wallet before I knew I had reached for it. That feeling pushed me up out of my seat. The carriage smelled of rain on leather and the metal tang of brakes. I had not planned to see him. Seeing him was a physical thing, his coat, the crease of his jaw, the old train pass peeking from his pocket. And it made the question I had carried since the last time burn louder. I thought of the last train, the hand I had thrust toward the closing door, and the way the carriage had swallowed him whole. I had shouted his name then. People had turned. The memory was an event, not a mood. His elbow against my palm, the glass sweating under my forehead, the platform lights sliding away. That image has pushed every choice I have made since. Abandonment sat like a hard coin in my mouth, tasted like a rejected ticket. I moved to the easel before I could argue myself out of it. My steps were measured. I let a commuter pass and then closed the small gap to the row where Ivan sat. My pulse sharpened. Doubt arrived next, a quick, brittle protein in my voice when I imagined calling his name and him keeping his head bowed and pretending not to hear. He stood as if on cue, the creased pass slipping from his coat onto the floor between our shoes. My hand dropped almost without thinking and I bent to pick it up. The pass was soft from years of folding. A strip of paper had been tucked into it. I could see the corner of handwriting. My doubt shifted into a new edge, curiosity. Luca, 2 seats down, watched me with that steady look he kept like a tool in his pocket. He slid his shoulder against mine in a brief, almost brotherly way. Not touching my ticket wallet, but offering company with the kind of small presence that suggested he had noticed things earlier than anyone else. I unfolded the scrap while the train hummed. The handwriting was short, a date, a place, a single word beside the date. The word made my chest hollow and then hot. I did not yet speak. I folded the paper back into his pass and kept it in my hand as the doors sighed open and even drifted toward the exit. I followed him off at the next stop, even though a part of me wanted to let the moment pass. Leaving the carriage felt like stepping past a closed room I had no right to enter. Passengers flowed around us. Someone jostled my shoulder. I threaded through the ticket hall while keeping Ivan in sight. My hesitation became a line of motion. Follow, close, force an answer. His pace was not quick. He carried his satchel like a shield. I could see his hands, a collar on the thumb, the thin silver band on his right hand. Each detail made the memory sharper and the question louder. When I caught up outside the ticket gates, dusk had started to press color into the station's glass. I called his name because I needed the sound to make him stop. Ivan, my voice did not try to be soft. It was a sound meant to halt someone who had already practiced leaving. He turned. He looked at me with that same controlled distance he always kept. Nora, my name like a measurement. The line between us held the weight of the carriage and the day it had closed. Why did you go? I said. The words came because the paper inside his pass had given me a reason to ask. My hands shook a little when I pushed the pass toward him on the platform concrete. Ivan looked at the card and then at me. He rubbed his neck the way he does when he hopes a physical motion will sort a problem. Nora, this isn't the place, it is the place, Ivan. I cut him off. People were moving past, but the platform felt like a stage now. You left without talking. You closed the door. Why did you close it? He leaned his head back, as if to buy time for words he could not make smaller. I didn't want to hurt you, he said finally. His voice was even. I thought it would be easier if you shoved yourself into that carriage and the door shut on me. I said it plainly. Tell me why you walked away. Tell me what was easier. He flinched in a way that broke his composure. I thought if I left, it would stop the fighting. I thought it would stop the questions I couldn't answer. His mouth pressed thin. Nora, I wasn't brave enough to stay and say what I couldn't fix. His words fell apart into smaller pieces. The emotion in him was sparse and practical, like he had rationed it. Anger hit then, quick and hot, so you left me to ask myself. I threw the ticket at him on the platform. The paper slid under a bench and almost fell through a crack. People glanced. My voice had edges in it now. Ivan took a breath and spoke faster, quieter. I thought I'd come back when I could explain. I intended to come back. I miscalculated. He miscalculated the way a man gives an invoice. Nora, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to do any of it without breaking more things. 3 commuters crossed between us, footsteps, a child's laugh. The station announcement fluttered across the air like a bird with clipped wings. The immediate urgency in my chest bent into a new shape, confusion. If he had intended to return, why was there only that single folded note tucked into a pass and no call, no message? No concrete attempt to fix what he'd left. I pushed. I had a right to push. Who is the date for? The place, what was that? I asked. My question demanded a name, a reason, a piece of the map where he had left himself. Ivan's eyes darted sideways, avoiding mine. He pressed his palm into the top of his satchel. It was work. I thought I could handle both and then come back. I was trying to take a transfer. I didn't know how long it would take. I thought I could keep you safe from the mess. His jaw worked. I'm not proud of walking like that, Nora. Doubt rippled through me again, but differently. It no longer only lived as abandonment. It braided with a suspicion that his distance might hide something practical and not solely emotional. I remembered the crease of his pass, the specific scrawl of the single word. If work had been the reason, why had he not left a single call? When I asked him even, why no call? His shoulders tightened. I thought if I called I'd convince you to stay and then I'd owe you explanations I couldn't give. He laughed once, a short, dry sound. I was cowardly and awful. I'm sorry. The platform lights threw thin bands of warmth against his coat. Luca's shadow fell over my shoulder. He had followed quietly and now stood a little behind me with the satchel at his feet. He watched the exchange with steady patience. He did not interrupt. He did not offer pity. He simply waited for the moment when I needed some help seeing the facts. I turned briefly to Luca. Luca, did you see him on the train? I asked. My voice softened. I needed the outsider's confirmation so the story would not be only mine to fix. Luca nodded. Yes, Nora. He looked like he had rehearsed walking away. He used fewer words than I would have expected. He had a pass fall out. You picked it up. Luca's presence moved the conversation in a new direction. His tone made me pull my mouth into a different shape, less accusation, more inventory. He had a way of making practical questions feel less like accusations and more like tools. I held the pass up and asked, "There was a word on this scrap. Did you see it too?" I waited for him to answer as Ivan shifted his weight, as if he could leave again. Luca read the corner of the paper and frowned. "That's a date for a transfer window at the Pembroke Yard," he said. "It doesn't explain the silence, but it explains the move." He pivoted to Ivan without making a show of it. "Ivan, why didn't you call? Did someone stop you? Were you prevented?" Ivan's eyes darted to Luca, then snapped back to me. "No one stopped me. I had chances. I didn't use them. It's my fault." He spoke quickly now, trying to shrink the space of his explanation. "I didn't answer calls because I couldn't admit how broken my words would be. I thought absence would spare you." A commuter cleared his throat behind us. The platform felt smaller, populated now by witnesses. My anger cooled to a brittle clarity. I needed facts, not apologies. I needed an explanation that matched the specific oddity of the folded scrap. I said, "If it was the transfer, show me the date. Show me where you were trying to go." My voice demanded the concrete. Ivan fumbled inside his satchel and produced a map of routes, folded small. He unfolded the paper with hands that trembled a touch. The route was marked, a transfer window circled, a notation in the margin that matched the handwriting on the scrap. He took a breath and said, "I thought I could take a week. I thought I'd sort the client's problem and come back. Then I couldn't get approval. Then I couldn't explain the delay without sounding like I had failed. I thought not saying anything would be easier for both of us." His fingers rubbed the crease where the map had been folded. My disbelief turned at that detail into a different feeling, a need for verification. That became a small plan. I would prove whether the transfer was real or an excuse. I would find the client's office, or the yard, or the paperwork that could turn his words into a timeline. Even tried to reach for my hand. "Nora, I know saying it now doesn't fix what I did." He paused. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know why I left." Anger flared again, but this time it contained a pragmatic strand. "Then show me the paperwork. Show me what you did or didn't do. I'll decide after I see the facts." I kept my voice even. Luca's quiet next to me felt like a line of backup. Ivan hesitated. His palms left his satchel and returned. "I can show you a transfer request, but it's messy. The files may not be approved yet." He sounded ashamed of the paperwork, as if it were a confession. I asked him to walk with me to the ticket window. "Let's not do this here," I said. Luca followed, keeping a small, steady distance behind us. The station buzzed. The evening trains called names and times. We moved like a slow current toward the counter. At the counter, the clerk kept his eyes on his screen and tapped keys. I placed the creased pass on the glass. "I need to know where this pass was intended to be used," I said to the clerk. His fingers flicked. He pulled up a record and pointed at a line of text. The transfer was real. The record showed a transfer request, stamped but pending approval, tied to a client account. The clerk read the name aloud in a voice that was not trying to be kind or cruel. "Pembroke Yard transfer request, pending approval." Hearing the line read by someone who did not know us turned Ivan's explanation into a public thing. He swallowed he to me, but he sounded small. I thought I could get it done and then come back. That did not erase the months of silence. It did not explain every omission, but it changed my understanding in a specific way. The abandonment shifted into a technical failing instead of pure carelessness. My anger eased at the edges and became a practical curiosity. How long exactly had he thought this would take? Why had he not left a single voicemail? Outside the window, the station clock read a time that made the day feel smaller. Light was thinning. Luca touched my elbow gently. "Nora, if you want, I can help look through the approvals office tomorrow," he said. His offer felt like a tool handed across the counter. A new emotion rose then, tentative strategy. I could wait for Ivan's explanations and let them thin like smoke, or I could do the work of checking records and timelines. I chose movement because movement wins against stuckness. Ivan nodded once, almost grateful for a chance to show documents rather than apologize. "I don't expect you to forgive me yet," he said. "I want you to know I tried in the way I could. I let the words sit. My reply was not a speech. "Show me tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the Pembroke office," I said. I kept it short because long sentences slip into rhetoric. Luca's nod behind me felt like a seconded motion. Ivan's jaw tightened. 9 a.m. Pembroke. "I'll be there." He met my eyes. For the first time in the exchange, his voice was small and exact. "Nora, I will bring everything I have." We left the counter with a faint, fragile plan. Luca fell into step to my left, as if we had always moved together that way. The station had the same noises, but the air between us felt rearranged into a line of appointments instead of accusations. At the platform edge, I folded the creased pass and slid it into my wallet. The action steadied me. The paper's edges were soft from being held. I walked to the ticket window and bought a ticket for the early train. The ticket seller handed it across with fingers that smelled faintly of coffee and screen polish. I did not make a promise to forgive. I did not pretend the months of silence were erased. I made a decision. I would move toward the explanation, not away from it. The ticket sat in my hand, small and specific. Dawn would bring proofs, signatures, faces in an office, or the lack of them. When the seller handed me the small rectangle of paper, I folded the pass tighter into my wallet, put my scarf around my neck, and stepped back into the station flow. Luca walked with me to the exit, and even stayed at the bench, running a palm over his neck. He looked like a man who had left a room and was being asked to re-enter with his hands empty. Outside, the night smelled like wet pavement and train oil. I kept the ticket in my palm until the last turn of the station's steps. Then, as I stepped into the street, I tucked it into the inside of my coat. I had decided to take a morning train. That was the action that settled the chapter for now. A concrete plan hinged on a deadline. 9 a.m. Pembroke. The station lights blurred into streaks of amber as people moved past. I felt a small, controlled steadiness in my limbs. It was not closure. It was a next step. I checked my phone for a message from Ivan and found none. I folded the wallet shut and kept walking toward the bus stop, the ticket warm in my pocket, the decision acting like a quiet hinge that had finally turned. An hour later, long after the platform emptied, I sat on my own couch and rehearsed what I would say in the morning. I wrote a short list. Ask about approvals, ask why no call, ask who signed off, ask what stopped him from answering. I made the list like an inventory. The list did not solve the ache inside me, but it turned the ache into work. I would take the train, ask the questions, and let proof meet words. That was all the resolution I had for tonight. The scrunched paper in my wallet pressed against my palm as I fell asleep, a small, hard thing that refused to be forgotten. The decision to buy a ticket had changed something. There was now a time and a place for truth. I would not invent forgiveness. I would not pretend the past had been handled. I would go and look, and when 9 a.m. came, the answers would arrive as files, as signatures, or as the absence of either. I slept with my hand on my wallet, and when I woke I would carry the creased pass toward Pembroke with a ticket in my pocket and a plan in my voice. I found a leather satchel propped against the shuttered ticket window, and the station cleaner said it had been there since the tea trolley left. Suspicion hit me like a physical shove. I bent, lifted the strap, and felt the shape of papers and something harder at the bottom. I had come back to this platform to look for small things I kept, a ticket, a receipt, a way to name what ended, and the satchel made those small things insist on being found. Suspicion pushed me forward. I said, "Who left this?" And the cleaner pointed toward the alley without answering my question. I moved the satchel into the shelter light and unfastened the flap with both hands. My fingers skimmed old coins, a folded receipts bundle, then the creased train pass Ivan always kept in his pocket. A pulse of cold spread through me. My hands tightened. I had expected the pass. I had not expected the folded ticket slipped sideways under it, its edge darkened by something that stuck to my thumb when I pulled it free. The station cleaner said, "Someone dropped it here earlier. Thought to leave it with the lost property. Miss." I looked at the ticket and felt the first shift, suspicion sliding toward alarm. Luca stood half in shadow against the booth doorway, his coat collar up against the chill. He had that steady way of coming into light, as if he did not startle the room. He stepped forward and said, "Open it." I heard the quiet in his voice and obeyed. "Open it," he said again. And his fingers hovered near the strap, as if he wanted to help but would not insist. I handed him the satchel. He eased the items out on top of the bench. The creased train pass, a stubbed pen, a coffee ring on a folded receipt, and the folded ticket with a timestamp that did not match the story Ivan had left me with. This isn't from that night. Luka even got on the 7:20. "2," I said. He left me standing on the platform. My voice came out flat. I repeated the plain facts because stating them felt like holding onto a map. Luka tapped the ticket edge and read the time aloud. 7:54, he said. "Different platform," I said. "But he was on the carriage." I heard my phrase as if I were testing it in air. Luka's jaw tightened. He looked at me and said, "Then the carriage detail is wrong, Nora. Or someone moved things." The second emotion shift came, doubt bending into a sharper fear. The station cleaner, named Raj when he introduced himself, kept folding the corner of an old timetable he had with him. "I saw a man hurrying by with a satchel 2 nights ago," he said. "He looked like he was trying not to be seen. Left it near the shutter afterward." Raj wiped his gloves on his trousers and said, "I didn't touch it. Lost property duty, you know." He blinked at me, then at the ticket, then back at me. "You sure about this being yours?" I said. Yes. The pass is Ivan's. That watch is his old train pass holder." I felt the words slide into place, practical and concrete. Luka closed his hand around the ticket and unfolded it slowly. The stamp was smudged at one corner, like a thumb had rubbed against wet ink. He held the smear up to the lamp. "There is a smear here," he said. "It could be dirt. It could be blood." He did not say which he thought it was. He looked at me with an expression that did not try to soften the possibility. The station cold felt closer. My throat tightened. My skin prickled. I moved my scarf higher as if covering my mouth could stop the questions. I thought of the night the carriage doors had closed on my reaching hand. I had shouted Ivan's name until the platform speakers swallowed it. I had watched his profile 5 seats ahead, turned away as if leaving were a practiced motion. Memory gave me precise sounds. The hiss of the doors, the scrape of a suitcase, and the metallic clack of the platform gate as the train pulled away. Now a ticket contradicted those sounds. The evidence required movement. I put my fingers over the crease where the timestamp lived and said, "Who else knew he was taking that later train?" Luka's fingers tightened around a silver lighter in his pocket. "Not many," he said. A woman in a commuter coat came down the stair and stopped short when she saw us by the shutter. She introduced herself as Mara and said, "I think I saw him days before. He wasn't alone." 2 men, they were talking low near platform 3. The voice was quick. Mara's description changed details as she remembered. The coat color, which side Ivan had walked on, whether the 2 men carried bags. She named Ivan as if trying to place him in a photograph. "You sure it was Ivan?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Tall, dark hair, that square jaw. He looked like he wanted to disappear." Her words tilted the scene. Now an eyewitness put Ivan moving with someone else, and the hint of being guided or hurried turned my suspicion into a theory. Ivan had been followed. "You saw them bring him toward a platform." "Luka." Mara nodded. "They weren't rough," she said, "but they weren't casual either. They kept him close." Her hands made a tight, short motion. I said, "Who were they?" She shook her head. "I didn't look. I just saw he wasn't alone," Raj added. "I remember a man like that with a crease under his eye." Kept looking over his shoulder. Raj pointed to the ticket smear and said, "Maybe those men dropped this when they left it here." He folded his gloves into his hands the way someone does before they leave a counter to make a point. I pressed my thumb into the crease of the ticket again and felt the smear catch under my nail. I tasted metal in my mouth and swallowed hard. I said, "Ivan would never have left this if he'd walked away on his own." The sentence landed like a set piece of evidence. Luka looked at me. "You always said he keeps things orderly." He said he would take his train pass with him. He would not misplace this. He Ivan's name in that slow way that made me hear the difference between fact and accusation. The station light hummed overhead. A distant announcement left the platform like a loose paper. We went to the waiting room bench to spread the items out. Luka placed the satchel on his knee, the strap worn at one corner. He opened the old leather wallet Ivan had used for train passes and tapped a crease where the pass had sat for years. "He kept it here, Luka. See the wear." He pulled out a folded note with Ivan's handwriting on it. Only a line, a list of dates. My hand shook when I took it. The handwriting was small and precise. The line included a date that matched a business dinner Ivan had mentioned before they stopped talking. I said, "Why would he fold this and leave it?" Luca shrugged and offered, "Maybe he didn't leave it. Maybe someone left it with him." A shape moved at the end of the corridor. I saw Ivan step from the shadow at the tunnel entrance. He stopped when he saw the satchel on the bench, and the three of us gathered like a small jury. Ivan's face went blank. He straightened his coat, but did not meet my eyes. I felt a burning need to ask the question that had lived in me for months. I stood and almost ran to him. "Ivan," I said, "why is your pass in this satchel?" He flinched as if the word had been an unexpected touch. He swallowed. "Nora," he answered, voice careful, "I didn't want you to follow me here." His avoidance was its own explanation and its own refusal. "You didn't want me to follow you," I said. "You left me on a platform." There was a rawness in my voice. My hands balled into the pockets of my coat. Ivan ran a palm over his neck and looked away. "I had to go, Nora," he said. "I couldn't do it then." I couldn't explain in front of everyone. I asked, "Explain what?" He met my eyes for a heartbeat, then looked at the ticket in Luca's hand. "Don't look at it like that," he said. "You won't like what you see." His words dropped like a stone between us. Luca's jaw tightened. He set the satchel down slowly. An electric scrape of metal in the underpass made all of us turn. A man in a dark coat moved away across the tunnel, stepping into a service door. He did not run. He did not hurry. He simply left. For an instant, everything focused on that shape. The way his shoulders carried a small bag, the slight limp when he reached the doorway. I said, "Stop," Luca, and I followed. Ivan hung back with his hands in his pockets. The figure had vanished behind a service door. We pressed our faces to the corridor shadow and listened. There was an echo of footsteps in a service stair. The moment stretched until a different sound reached us. Someone gasped 2 levels above and a small scuffle, then silence. A meeting unfolded in the underpass beneath the tracks. Luca's voice was low when he said, "We need to do something now." I felt the weight of that decision. My throat worked around a dry swallow. Ivan's mouth thinned. "You don't know what you want me to do," he said. His hands rolled a thin silver band on his right hand. "I didn't tell you because I thought I could handle it alone." He looked at me with a fatigue I had not seen before. "Handle what?" I asked. Being followed, he nodded. Yes, his admission snapped a new line through the facts. My suspicion turned into a shape with edges. Ivan had been followed. He had tried not to alarm me. He had left on a train to avoid making me part of whatever he faced. We moved together along a service corridor where a maintenance lamp flickered and threw the floor into a hard rectangle of light. The air smelled of hot metal and detergent. Luca reached into his satchel and took out a notebook, its corners dog-eared. He flipped to a page where he'd written down details I had not yet told him aloud. He answered my call once. Luca hesitated at the door and hung up. He sounded scared. I pressed my thumb harder into the ticket crease. My jaw tightened. Who would follow Ivan? I asked. Who would make him walk away from me? Luca put his hand on my elbow. The brief touch meant for steadiness. His palm was warm despite the cold. We nearly crashed into a commuter walking briskly out of the underpass. The woman stopped and said, "I saw him that night. The man in the coat." He steered Ivan toward platform 4. I thought they were friends at first. She it quickly, like a list of items. I was late for a meeting. I thought it was nothing then, but I saw the way Ivan kept looking over his shoulder. Her name was Priya. She bit her lip and said, "I didn't want to get involved." "Luca, can you describe the man?" He had a jagged scar along his jaw. Walked with a limp on the left. Kept a bag under his arm. Raj slapped his palm once on his knee. "That's the man I told you I thought I saw," he said. The evidence stacked into a geometry that forced a conclusion. In the underpass, a door banged once and slammed. The sound made us all jump. Something inside me clenched and then opened into action. I said, "We follow the trail." Luca answered, "We call the station office." We checked cameras. Ivan's mouth tightened like he had swallowed sand. "Please," he said, "don't put me in that position again." His voice dropped. He turned away and pressed both palms to the tiled wall as if steadying himself. I said, "Ivan, do you understand why I need to know?" He looked at me then with a small, precise anger. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "You have no idea what I'm dealing with." His shortness of breath and the way his hands shook showed the fear he would not otherwise name. We found a security monitor loop in the station office. A young man named Ben took our names and put the loop on a screen. The footage showed people moving across palms in half speed. We watched frame by frame. There was even, stepping down from a stair, then two men near him. One had the jagged jaw, the other a broad coat. In the frames the men did not shove him. They spoke in low tones and then walked with him. In the next frame Ivan's pace changed. He looked right, then left, then toward the carriage as if searching for an excuse to leave. The footage stopped on his face. In the freeze his eyes were not belligerent, they were flat. I felt the chapter's mini cliffhanger then. In one paused second the man with the scar turned his head and looked directly at the ceiling camera. For an instant that camera met a face that should not have noticed it. The on-screen man lifted his hand as if to wipe a smudge, and the screen flared with the reflection of the lamp. My mouth went dry. The screen resolved again and the man was walking away. Ben rewound and said, "We should call the police, Luca." "Not yet. Let us gather what we can." He closed his notebook and placed the ticket on top. Ivan stepped closer to the screen with his hands in his pockets. "I don't want you calling the police on me," he said. "I can't explain everything here." He looked at me with a ferocity that almost felt like pleading. Outside, the platform lamp painted the ground a tired yellow. We took the items back to the bench. Luca folded the ticket along its crease and put it into his notebook. "We document everything," he said. "We don't make moves until we know the pattern." I sat down and slid the creased pass into my coat pocket. The action was small and deliberate. It was a reclaiming. Raj put his hand on his broom as if ready to sweep the scene away. Priya checked her watch and said, "If it came from them, it won't sit long in lost property." Ben tapped the monitor again. "There are service doors behind platform 6. He said. "They lock after midnight, but maintenance goes through at 3 a.m. Maybe someone used that route." The possibilities multiplied into plans. Even finally spoke to me alone for a moment. "I didn't tell you because I thought I could handle it. I thought I could push them off my track." He looked at the floor and his voice hollowed. "I thought I could keep it from you." I said, "Even. You left a ticket. You left your pass. You left me with the door shut and no words." He swallowed. "I know," he said. "I am sorry for the way I left. But I'm asking you to trust me now. Please." His eyes were wet but controlled. He did not ask me to forgive. He asked me to trust him to act. That request forced me to choose between anger and a coordination that might actually find the truth. We agreed to meet at the lamp before dawn. Luca, he would check a list of connections Ivan had mentioned in passing. Raj promised to watch the lost property register. Priya gave us a description of the man's limp that included a detail she had not volunteered before. A worn patch on the right knee of the coat. Ben arranged to pull the security archive for the last 2 nights. We divided work in small, practical sleeves. One would check cameras, one would try to find who the bag belonged to, one would try to get Ivan to place his steps in public records. The plan made me less frantic. Planning replaced the rawness with process. Back on the empty platform beneath the lamp, I folded the strange ticket into my wallet and slid it into the worn leather ticket holder I carried. The smear caught against the leather and left a faint dark line on my thumb. Luca closed the satchel and zipped it with a practiced motion. "We will follow the trail at first light," I nodded. The lamp buzzed, Ivan kept his hands in his pockets and did not say anything else. He watched me fold the ticket. The chapter ended with a concrete, simple movement. I put the ticket in my wallet and walked to the edge of the platform while Luca carried the satchel toward the service door. The lamp threw a long, straight rectangle of light across the tiles, and the 3 of us walked away from it in separate directions, each carrying a small piece of evidence and a determined, uneasy plan. I stepped onto the platform and froze when Ivan climbed down from the last train. Abandonment tightened my chest in a way that made my hands fumble with the folded ticket in my palm. He looked older in the station light, his satchel slung the same way it had been the night he left, and the first thing I wanted to say was his name. Ivan stopped, but my voice stayed lodged behind my teeth. A man pushed past with a commuter's impatience and the train hissed. Ivan did not move toward me the way he once would have. The conflict was immediate and visible. A man who had left without a goodbye, and a woman holding the single paper had never stopped feeling like an accusation. I had come back because the past kept producing small, stubborn facts. The carriage door that had closed on my reaching hand was one of those facts. The ticket wallet I kept in the pocket of my coat was another. I kept my coat closed against the night and reminded myself to breathe while the platform lights threw rectangles of warmth across the concrete. My movements were deliberate. I stepped forward, kept my shoulders steady, and let my eyes find even. This was not a plea. I wanted answers, not a repetition of the old scene where I chased and he disappeared. Ivan turned when he heard my name. He took 2 steps down the platform and stopped. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked like a man who had rehearsed indifference. "Nora," he said, low and even, "what are you doing here?" His voice had its practiced distance. That distance had been the thing that hurt more than any absence. "You left," I said. "You left without saying goodbye." My hands tightened around the ticket until the paper creased. Saying it aloud folded the accusation into evidence. Abandonment had been the lens I used for every memory of him. It pushed the way I stepped and spoke now. I followed him because I needed to force a different ending than the one where the train took him away. My choices that night were driven by that single, raw rule. Do not allow the past to close without a last line. Ivan's jaw moved. He kept his gaze low. "I didn't plan to leave you like that," he said. I thought. He stopped. He ran a palm over his neck in the gesture he made when he was uncomfortable. That gesture had been there in the carriage, in the photo in my wallet, in the 3 arguments where he chose silence over answers. I felt the first shift in the room, abandonment sliding into suspicion. Why would he choose silence unless there was something he was protecting himself from? I advanced into the underpass without waiting for a fuller answer. The underpass felt narrow and honest. The tiles were cool under my boots, and there was the faint smell of oil where the station heating met the night. Luca followed at a measured distance. He had been nearby when I came in, the kind of man who notices a small, folded thing in someone else's hand and remembers how to ask about it. He kept his coat open, hands visible, and his eyes steady on both of us. His presence changed the geometry of the confrontation. 2 people who had history and 1 stranger who wanted the truth. My suspicion hardened into a guarded demand. "Even," I said again in the corridor, where echoes made each syllable lean into the next. "Why did you run?" I did not raise my voice. I did push my shoulder forward to close the space between us. Closifying, no. I simply wanted sound to carry where decades of silence had built walls. Ivan's face went slack for a moment. He avoided my eyes. "I thought leaving would be cleaner," he said. "I thought I could fix what I hadn't been able to say." He spoke slowly, keeping his sentences short the way he always had. "I was scared, Nora." The word scared was a small fracture in his usual reserve. That admission shifted something in me from simple anger to a complicated tangle. Anger into a pained curiosity. I wanted to test it. I wanted to see if fear explained what looked like abandonment. Luca stepped between us then, not as an obstruction, but as a steadying presence. He placed a hand briefly on my elbow. "Nora, slow down," he said. "Hear him out." His voice had a low warmth that suggested he meant to hold the moment open, not shut it. His manner was deliberate. He watched Ivan's hands, the calluses on them, the way he folded his fingers around the strap of his satchel. Luca's intervention was practical, not moral. He wanted to prevent escalation that turned the confrontation into a standoff instead of a collapse. A station cleaner appeared at the ticket window with a plastic bag and an apologetic nod. He set the bag between us as if placing evidence on a table. "Found this in the satchel," he said. He held out a worn envelope. I took it with hands that trembled just enough for the paper to rustle. The envelope bore Ivan's handwriting on the outside. The shift in the room that had been moving quietly, suspicion toward curiosity, hit a new register. Discovery. An external event had arrived and it contained a fact. I slit the envelope with a thumbnail and slid out a train pass with a return date in a folded note. The pass looked creased in a way that said it had been used, then left. The note had only 3 lines in Ivan's hand. My pulse leaned forward as I read aloud because my throat needed the weight of words to stay steady. "Nora," the first line began. The carriage had carried his profile 5 seats away. It had not been a total leaving. The truth folded inside that paper suggested a different story than the one I had told myself for years. The mini cliffhanger hit then. The note ended in a line that did not explain everything. For a moment I could not tell whether the revelation would mend what I had built on grief or crack it further. Ivan watched me. He did not reach for the paper. I came back before. I waited on the platform. I left when I thought you were gone. His sentences came out in measured pieces. He kept avoiding my eyes. Luca's jaw tightened. He had been listening for the angle that could change the whole thing. My emotion shifted again, suspicion into a rattled hope that perhaps there had been a plan, then into a renewed confusion because the new detail raised more questions than it answered. If Ivan had returned before and not reached out, then the absence had been chosen for reasons other than fear alone. So why didn't you find me? I asked. My voice was quieter but sharper. I stepped back and pressed my thumb along the crease of the pass until the paper bent under my skin. Why did you let me shout and chase a train? Why did you make me throw myself at a carriage? Each line came out as a small, precise demand. Ivan's hands curled into fists without him noticing. Something was wrong with the station system that night, he said. They closed the platform early. The announcements were a mess. I waited and the trains changed. He spoke like a man reading a report. I had to choose between following you, making a scene, or leaving without more chaos. He swallowed. I took the train because I thought it would be less painful for both of us if I left cleanly. That was a partial truth. The details fit together, but left a gap the size of the folded ticket in my hand. Luca lifted his chin and produced a ticket from his coat pocket, the one that tilted the balance in the corridor. He smiled without humor. This is dated the day after he claimed to have left, Luca. He flattened the ticket on his palm and held it up, even planned to return. The paper had the same creases as the pass in my hand. Luca's discovery announced a twist. Ivan's absence might not have been a simple retreat. It suggested a plan had changed. The revelation altered how I remembered earlier nights. The concrete evidence shifted anger to the sharpness of betrayal, then to the quieter ache of confusion. Ivan's shoulders dropped as if he had been bearing something and decided, in that instant, to let it rest. I was supposed to come back. I had a ticket. I thought I could set things right, but I saw you with someone else that night on the platform. I thought. He stopped. He could not finish the sentence. The silence took up the space where explanations would live. My mind reached for the memory. Who had been with me that night? The image came. I had been alone. The thought of another person near me was false. The second shift inside me moved from confusion into a hot suspicion again. Had he seen someone? Had he chosen to leave because of a mistaken sighting? Or had he seen absence and decided absence was the safer option? Who did I look like was with you, Ivan? I demanded. Who did you think I was with? My words hit like pebbles against a locked door. I wanted clarity and the demand was simple. He folded his hands tighter around his satchel strap and pressed his thumb near the thin silver band that hid on his right hand. Ivan's reply was small. Someone leaving with you. I thought you had already decided. He pressed his lips together. I didn't know how to change it without breaking something more. There was a tremor in his voice that suggested fear mixed with regret. That emotion mix nudged something in me from suspicion to a guarded empathy that I did not expect. I felt my mouth go dry as two lines of feeling tried to occupy the same space. The right to be angry and the sudden, cumbersome knowledge that he had been afraid. We argued then in short, sharp exchanges. You left me shouting on the platform. Ivan, I said, you left me alone under the lamp while a train took you away. You don't know what I thought I was protecting, he answered. You don't understand the way I freeze, Nora. I shouted your name, I said. I pushed the carriage glass. You chose silence. I chose not to make you watch me fail. He shot back. I chose what felt like less harm. For 3 minutes our voices traded blows the way the trains traded passengers. The conversation hit the mandatory rapid exchange the night demanded. Each time I said his name he flinched as if I had struck him, and then steadied himself and spoke again. Luca kept interrupting at small moments, not to take sides but to anchor facts. Ivan, did you actually have a ticket dated for return? He asked. Yes, Ivan, I showed it to you earlier when you left. I didn't think I could get to you without causing a scene. Then why didn't you call? Luca, why not a message? A note. Ivan's answer was a tight thing. My phone died, I thought. Then he stopped because he realized how thin the "my phone died" explanation sounded. The sequence of questions showed that the secondary characters were deciding what details mattered. Luca's choices pushed the story forward. A passerby rattled a bike chain near the passage, and the sound cut through our talk. An announcement about a delayed service played on the loudspeaker and gave us a time stamp. Trains rerouted. Platform 2 closed at 9:32. The station's mechanical voice became another witness. This external event forced the argument to add a practical fact to the emotions. If platforms had indeed closed early that night, the story of leaving looked different. If not, Ivan's choice looked like something else entirely. I demanded proof, which is to say I demanded a document I could hold. Luca handed me his creased ticket again. I compared it to the pass I had found in the envelope. The dates matched. The edges matched. That match was a small, decisive pivot. My anger cooled into something that felt like recalibration. The touch of realization entered. Maybe Ivan had planned to return, and maybe an operational detail or a mistake had turned planning into absence. The twist changed the narrative I had lived by. It did not erase the hurt, but it offered a new frame for it. The climax came at the platform edge where the masonry met the rails. Ivan stepped closer and then put his hands out, a gesture that was not an apology so much as a physical attempt to be seen. I remember the exact sound my boots made against the concrete. "Nora," he said, voice rawer than before. "I wanted to come back. I tried to come back. I didn't want to explain because I thought explanations would fail you." His hands trembled. Luca watched with his tilted head, the one that made him look like he was listening to a detail in a story he could not yet place. I felt the tension build to the place where decisions happen. We could press the wound open further, or we could choose a resolve. Our conversation tightened into quick, pointed exchanges. "Why didn't you call?" I asked. Voice small and dangerous. "Why not a note?" "My phone died," he answered. Then immediately, "I tried once, the battery was dead. I left a message on the landline. But someone picked up and said there was no one by your name." "Who picked up?" Luca even stared at the tracks and said, "A woman." Shimiyu had already left the station. The words rearranged the scene. Now someone else's action had become part of why he left. The rapid back and forth jolted the moment into its most exposed shape. I stopped him before he could close himself again. "Who was the woman?" I demanded. "A cleaner, a station employee." Even looked up finally and met my eyes. "A passenger who had your coat on the bench next to her," he said. "She called to someone on the platform. Assumed I was with you, and that was the last I saw before the carriage door closed." The detail altered how we judged intention. It pushed me through a second emotional shift. From anger and suspicion into a heavy, aching resignation that some of what we felt had not been designed by malice but had been constructed by small, misinterpreted facts. The physical moment arrived when Ivan reached for the thin silver band on his right hand as if to read something there and then let it go. He had not worn that band before. The sight of it changed my memory of our shared photos. I realized some of the things I had been storing were partial. A new fact altered the ledger of blame. Luca's eyes softened slightly. He stepped forward and placed a folded ticket on the bench between us. "You can't just leave this open forever," he said. "Evidence is evidence." His statement was not moralizing. It was practical. The decision I needed to make felt like a movement in muscle and bone. I could continue to demand a full accounting in words. I could insist on every detail. I could hold on to the version of the past that kept me right and angry. Or I could do something smaller and more exact. Let a single object settle what I would keep. I unfolded the ticket in my hands. It was worn along the crease where my thumb had rubbed it for years. I had carried it like proof of his injury to me. I put the ticket down on the bench, then pressed it into the slot of the battered ticket machine. The machine took the paper with a soft, final clunk. Ivan watched, and for the first time in a long time he looked open in a way that was not manufactured. "Nora," he said. "If I could turn back that night, I would try to stay. I'm sorry I didn't make it clearer." His apology landed like rain. It did not fix everything. It made a small, honest dent in the thing I had carried. Luca did not speak then. He folded his hands and looked at me the way someone watches a friend who is finishing a difficult task. The music of the station, announcement, a distant carriage, the squeak of a trolley, stayed in the edges while we settled, for the first time, into the consequence of what had passed. Even stepped backward into the station shadow as if to let the moment conclude. He did not demand forgiveness. He did not ask for it. He simply stepped away. I took a breath that was controlled and precise, the way I had learned to move when I wanted to keep my face calm, but my choices honest. Then I did something I had not expected. I put my hand in my coat pocket and took out my own train pass, the one I used every week for the ride home. I tucked it into my wallet and zipped it closed. It was an action that said I would continue my life without waiting for him to define it. It was not triumph, it was a practical, visible choice. Luca kept his satchel over his shoulder and said, "I'll walk with you to the carriage, Nora." His voice was steady. He did not offer to replace even. He offered presence. I accepted. Presence is not a solution, but it is a kind of map. We walked back to the platform together. The carriage doors sighed open and closed in the rhythm of leaving and returning. On the platform, I turned once and watched Ivan vanish down the passage. He did not look back. The station swallowed the rest of him. The final act of the chapter was small and concrete. I fed the folded ticket into the battered machine, and then traced the edge of the coin slot as if checking its promise. The machine ate the paper, and the light above the bench blinked. I folded my scarf tighter and stepped onto the last carriage with a steadier chest than when I had arrived. Luca took the seat across the aisle. He did not reach for my hand, but he kept his eyes on me as if to say I had done enough for that night. The final paragraph must end with an action, and so it does. I closed the satchel, zipped the leather ticket wallet into its pocket, and set it on my lap as the train began to move. The platform lights slid past, and I held the memory of the envelope and the creased pass against my ribs like a small instruction. I was not certain that the gap between Ivan's choice and my understanding was wholly closed, but I had decided where to leave the paper. I had chosen to feed it into the machine rather than fold it into a wound. The carriage hummed. I folded my hands over the satchel and watched dusk pass by the window as the last train carried me away.